Welcome to the Thomas Griswold House Museum. It is one of 5 museums we have here in Guilford. We have the Henry Whitfield Museum, which is owned by the state of Connecticut, the oldest stone house in New England, the Highland House down the street on Boston Street, which is one of the houses that you will hopefully go to in the spring for Early Guilford Day. And then we have our Thomas Griswold House, which is owned by the Guilford Keeping Society. And I'm Miss Lovelace, Pat Lovelace, and I'm the museum director here at the Griswold House and at our Medad Stone Tavern Museum, which is over on the other side of town by Cox School. And then up North Guilford, we have the Dudley Farm. So Guilford's very lucky to have 5 museums. So today, while you're visiting the Thomas Griswold House, you're going to be doing a scavenger hunt. It's not the kind of scavenger hunt where you run all over the place and you try to find things. It's more of a guided scavenger hunt. This is the scavenger hunt booklet that you're going to be doing here today at the Griswold House. And then when you go back to school, you will be working with your teacher and hopefully you'll be able to fill in all the boxes. There are boxes in here which have numbers on them underneath certain letters. And at the end, after you're all done with all the riddles, you can go to the back page of the booklet and you will have a question. What style house is the Thomas Griswold House? So you take the letter that the number is below and you put it in each box and you will be able to tell what kind of style of house. So we're going to start right here in this room. This is called the parlor. And the parlor is where the family would gather when somebody special came to visit, like the minister or somebody who was very special to them. What we're going to do is there are going to be riddles that we're going to read, and we're going to look around the room and try to find the object that the riddle is talking about. And you need to think about what the riddle says and maybe what the object is used for or what it looks like or whatever. So we're going to start with the first riddle. We light your room and use a special oil. It makes an awful black smoke, and your paint it will spoil. And many times in early Guilford they had candles. But all of a sudden they figured out, and they were out on the ocean hunting whales, and they realized that the oil from the head or the body of the whale and boiled down fat could be used in a tin lantern or tin light, and they would pour the oil in the hole in the right hand side above the handle, and then they would have a wick coming out the middle part, and that would burn much longer than the candle would, and they didn't have to make the candles as much as they used to. We're little wooden feet that never danced a jig. We help the cobbler with his job, making boots little and big. What am I? Now, today if you go to get shoes, you go to a shoe store or you go to Macy's or Walmart or somewhere and get a pair of shoes. But in early Guilford days, you had to go to a shop run by the shoemaker. And he would get leather from a tanner, and they would have these shoe forms, and you would go in and they would pick one up, and they would match it to the bottom of your foot. And if it was pretty close to your foot, they would make that particular shoe for you. However, sometimes there was only one shoe form. There wasn't a left and a right. So it wasn't always comfortable. And because they had to be so specially made, people didn't have a lot of shoes. I'm a little tool with a scissors handle. I'm sitting on a silver plate and help to trim your candle. So back in those days, as I said before, they used a lot of candles, that they had to make homemade candles. And the wick, after a while when it burns, gets long and black and ugly looking. So what they would do, And these happen to be silver ones. Sometimes they're not, sometimes they're iron. But these are silver ones made by the silversmith, another shop that would be in town. And what they would do as the candle wick burnt, let's imagine this is burnt, they would take this, and it's like a scissor, and they would clip it. It's a little hard because it's a thick one, but it would clip it, and the candle, there it goes, and then the bad part of the candle, the burnt part, would go in this little box. The best one in the house, the fanciest thing of all. Look at what you're standing on. I go from wall to wall. When the Guilford Keeping Society bought the Griswold house to use as a museum, they bought it from the Griswold family, and they were the only ones who had ever lived in this house, generations of the family. Thomas Griswold built it in 1764 and gave it to two of his sons, and they and their family lived in the house, and then some of their children and some of their children. So when they bought the house, the Griswolds took everything with them. They took everything that was in the house with them. So the Guilford Keeping Society did some research and found an inventory in the town hall. And when someone died in the early Guilford days, they made a record of everything they owned. And they found out that in about 1812, the Griswold who lived here, owned a carpet, a fancy carpet. So the Keeping Society had a carpet maker in England make this carpet, because that's where the carpets would have come from in those days. So this is very, very similar to the kind of carpet that would have been in this fancy parlor. A special kind of chair, I have slender little posts with an extra piece for your head. I'm more comfortable than most. So this is a chair. There's lots of chairs in this room, but the one we're looking for has a back where you can put your head that looks sort of like a comb. And it's these two chairs here. And that is called a comb back chair. And it's a rocker, and it's very comfortable. As you can see, and hand painted by an artist. I have a little handle and hide under the bed. If it's too cold to go to the outhouse, you could use me instead. What am I? Back in early Guilford, there were no bathrooms in the house. They would have a building outside they would have to go out to, and they would go to the bathroom there. But when it was really cold or dark at night, they didn't want to do that, or snowed or whatever. So they would have a chamber pot under their bed, slide under their bed, and if they needed to use the bathroom, they would just get up and do their duty into the chamber pot, and it would be emptied out in the morning, back out into the outhouse, and reused again, cleaned up and reused again. I am a wooden tool. You twist me and you pull. My slot fits over part of the bed, so your sleep is comfortable. Back in early Guilford, the beds, made out of wood, would have rope underneath where the mattress would be. And the mattress might be full of horsehair or some other kind of material. And they would have these ropes underneath. And as you can see, if you look at the bed, it kind of slopes in the middle because rope after a while will stretch. And so it would be very uncomfortable to sleep like that. So what they would do is they had something made of wood. It's called a rope tightener, carved out of wood. And they would take it, they pull the rope, this one needs to be pulled a lot, and then they would turn it and the rope would get so that they could pull it and they could tighten where the knot is on the rope. They could tighten it up to make it more comfortable for the people who are sleeping in the bed. And they might have to do it in a couple different places around the bed where the rope is. I would was made by Reuben Stone for Miss Kimberly's class. He must have known his geography. I'm sure she let him pass. What am I? Look around the room. Something to do with geography. Well, that has to do with continents and oceans. Oh, it must be this map up here. Reuben Stone did this in 1841. He was a student in Guilford, and in those days they didn't have art class in school, so probably on a Saturday or after school he went to Miss Kimberly's house, which I think was just down the street here on Boston Street, and she would teach him different art things to do. And he got this pattern of a map of the world and he colored it in, and he was able to learn what the continents were and what the oceans were. Julia spent her time on me when she was young and old. Not only pretty stitching through my Meade family history is told. What am I? Back in early Guilford, girls had to do a lot of sewing because they had to make clothes and they had to make sheets and they had to make towels and anything that they used in their house that was made out of fabric they had to make. So before they could do that, they would do what's called a sampler. And this is Julia Griswold's sampler. She lived in this house. She did this sampler in 1835, 36, kind of hard to read on here. She did the top part, which is letters. They usually did letters. Sometimes they did a Bible verse. Here she put her name and when she did it. But then when she married John Parmalee, who lived up the street in the Highland House, she added his birthday, her birthday, the day they were married, and their 3 children's birthdays. So this is an unusual sampler. We have many samplers here at the Griswold house done by many young ladies in Guilford back in the early Guilford days. I'm not from New England. It's much too cold up here. Someone brought me back from travels as an exotic souvenir. What am I? Well, if you look around this room, most of the things came from the area, and so it has to be the conch shell, because we can't find those here in New England. Many of the young men, and even some of the older men, were sailors on ships, even some were captains of ships. And they would go down to the Caribbean or down to the southern part of the colonies, or later on what was the United States, and they would bring something back for their family. So many, many homes had a conch shell in their sitting room or their parlor or whatever to use to show that they had been visiting other places or been to other places. Made of tortoise shell, I have many teeth, beware. No, I'm not an animal. You wear me in your hair. What am I? Well, back in early Guilford, as you can see in the silhouette picture of a lady there, they always had long, long hair. They didn't have hairdressers. They could go and get their hair cut and everything. So they would let their hair grow, and they would put it up into a bun on the back of their head or a braid. And they would use the comb made from the tortoise shell, the outer shell of a tortoise, and after the tortoise had died, they'd take the shell off and they would carve it into these comb shapes, and they would use that. And they would stick it into their hair to hold the bun up to keep their hair in the right style. I have a little door and a wooden frame. Hot coals inside me keep you warm. Pierced tin protects me from flame. What am I? Well, when you went out in your carriage on a real cold day to go to church or go visit grandma or whatever, it was very hard to stay warm. So what they would do is they would take their foot warmer, which had this handle on it so they didn't burn themselves, and they would take out the little box inside, and they would put coals from the fireplace into the box, put it back in. These are made out of tin so they don't catch fire. The outer part is made out of wood, but because it's wrapped all in tin all the way around, it's not going to burn the wood. And this is made so that it has a pretty pattern on it, on the top and the bottom and the sides, so that they could take it with them and put it down on the floor in their carriage or their wagon or whatever they were going to be riding in, and it would keep their feet warm. Made of linen, I am tough. I had to be. You see, a woman wore me all day long, so I got very, very dirty. What am I? This is a linen shift, and the lady would have probably grown the flax and spun the flax and made it into linen thread, and then she would have woven it, and then she would have sewn it. So it took a long time. They had to grow the flax and do all that other stuff. So she didn't have many of these. So she would wear it, and it would be underneath her skirt, underneath maybe another top that she had on and stuff. And then sometimes she would even wear it as a nightgown. So it was a very, very useful piece of clothing. And back in those days, they didn't have a lot of clothing because they had to make it. They'd make everything themselves. I'm both red and blue and hold some fragile things. My paint is old itself, along with my doors which swing. If you look around the room, there's not a lot of places to store things, but in an early Guilford house, they would have what's called a corner cupboard. It has a curved back, and it's set into a corner, and they would use it for storing things that maybe they didn't want to get broken, like dishes and teapots and glasses and things like that. These doors close, they have glass on them so you can see what's inside, and then the bottom door is one door. In Guilford, this is called a Guilford corner cupboard or a storage cupboard because it's the style that most houses in Guilford have from early Guilford days. So it's called a Guilford corner cupboard. Sugar came in cones, so how'd they put it in their tea? Not a lump or a spoonful, you get a pinch by using me. What am I? Back in early Guilford days, sugar had to be brought a long way from either down south where it was grown or in the Caribbean. And so to keep it so it would, nothing would happen to it, they would make it into cones. And this is a sugar cone. And they would use it very sparingly because it cost a lot of money and they wouldn't have a lot of it. So in order to get a piece off that cone, they would take these sugar pinchers, again, maybe made by the silversmith or the blacksmith, and they would pinch off, that's why they're called sugar pinchers, they would pinch off a piece of sugar. These are not too sharp right now, so they won't do it as well, but they would pinch off a piece and put it in their tea. So they'd have a pinch of sugar in their tea. When you work on a farm, muddy shoes are not rare. Use me before you come in and you'll have stocking feet or maybe bare. What am I? This is a boot jack. And as you can see, a boot jack is made out of wood. Another thing that is made out of wood. And this would be used by the farmer because when he's out in the field working, it's kind of muddy sometimes, and sometimes the cows are out there and the sheep and everything, and so there's a lot of stuff out there that they don't want to bring in the house. So the wife would have the boot jack hanging near the back door, and he would reach in and get it and take off his shoes before he came into the house. And how it works, okay, put your foot down, put your heel in, and pull, and you can see my shoe is coming off. Used for grinding corn, I look like a tree stump. My hammer is pretty heavy and makes a very loud thump. What am I? Well, back in early Guilford, there were Native Americans living here, and that's who they had bought the land from. And they taught the settlers back in those days how to make a samp mortar. And a samp mortar was used to grind different kind of grains and corn and make it into flour. So they would put the dried kernels of corn, they dry them first, put them in there, and they just keep banging and banging and banging and banging and banging. And usually I think it was probably done by a strong lady or her strong son maybe, or her husband, and they would keep banging until it's in a powder form that they can use in their baking. They would also use it for rye and wheat and other kinds of grains that they might have. Anything that was hard that they wanted to grind up to make flour out of. It's a samp mortar. A table, chair, or chest I've made of wood and very old. As furniture goes, I'm one of the best and belong to the family Griswold. What am I? This piece of furniture was brought by the Griswold family, the children of Thomas Griswold, and was taken with them to Pennsylvania when they went there to settle. And when they found out that the Keeping Society opened a museum in 1957, they decided to send it back to us. And so we have it here in the house. So you could also use it as a table, and it folds down and you have an extra table to do some cooking work on it, or if you have extra people coming to eat, you have an extra table. So it's a table, a chair, and a bench. I'm a tool for cooking. You'll use me a lot. Slide your hooks different places to change the warmth of your pot. What am I? Well, when you made a fire in a fireplace like this, you would make it there in the middle. And it might get really, really hot, and your pot might start to boil and cook the food too fast. So you could use a hook. It is here in the pile. Use a hook, and you would grab it with a hook made by the blacksmith, and this is made by the blacksmith, and you could adjust it. This is called a crane. It's called a crane because it is straight out like the way that a crane flies up in the sky, so they kind of nicknamed it the crane. And you can move your pot that way on using the hook, you can move it that way. A lot of times, it was very dangerous. The ladies in those days had big skirts, so leaning over was really hard. So that's why the blacksmith made them the hook so that they could grab it and not have to be right over the fire. Okay. The next riddle says, I only have 3 legs, but I think you'll see why. I'm named after an insect, an 8-legged guy. But you know, really, I don't think it was an insect. I think it was an arachnid. This is a spider. And it's called a spider because it has these big long legs, and you can rest it on what's called the hearth. The stone part is called the hearth. You would take the shovel out of your bucket of tools. You would take some of the hot coals and you would put it underneath the spider, and you could cook something out here.